All right, is everyone ready? Andrew? Observation points resolution analysis states points resolution. The United States government substantially reduces tactical nuclear weapons arsenal. The base points is round. Should be evaluated the lens and net benefits and the cost plan versus benefits plan to the lens of policymaker. Observation 2 is inherent. The ace points that the U.S. has made deep cuts to its arsenal. The status quo they had after the new started the cap back 1,550. Obama has also discussed the ability to actually remove some more of the weapons. And in fact, in the State of the Union, he outlined a plan to reduce ICBMs, SLBMs, and bombers. The base points that the U.S. now has 200 TWs in NATO are and sees points that withdrawal would occur how occurs in the status quo, particularly when we withdraw our TWs from Turkey. The these points that the Navy has already retired the Tomahawk nuclear missile. The Navy recently indicated in 4 lines of 3 days ago that the Tomahawk missile will no longer be used. These points that sequester this already impacts contractors' status quo. The loss of stocks that occurred afterwards was particularly devastating for many of the industrial corporations. The F-points F-35 is going to be scrapped in the status quo due to a decrease in Boeing stocks. This argument is Obama has called for reductions in progress, recently indicating that there's ready collaboration with Russia. The I is a strategic reduction will occur argues that 2018 because of the New START treaty. There'll be a reduction of 1,550. The J points that the U.S. is sending Tom Dillon to be able to speak in Moscow and March to indicate that's a perception that we will act. That's the plan. The United States federal government, through an act of the executive, should decommission its tactical nuclear weapons present in NATO countries. Again, the USFG, through an act of the executive, should decommission its tactical nuclear weapons present in NATO countries, funding enforcement via normal means. Any questions? Evangelist NATO? The ace points that U.S. policy and status quo makes this so that the U.S. and NATO are distant. Our first argument is U.S. policies will lead to a collapse. Now is the key time. The unilateral action that the U.S. has been doing in the past couple of years means that there's a perception of NATO that the United States is way too aggressive. This will lead to an inevitable hard balancing in which NATO is inevitably going to have to say policies are able to counterbalance the way in which the U.S. is overtaking their interests. Arguments that are all however, there is only currently soft balancing the status quo proven by the way in which France has been legitimately criticized. The United States policies in the region are arguments also NATO is seeking to shift away from the United States absent the ability to pull things like CNWs. Second argument is the U.S. deployment of CNWs with countries is causing this. Germany and Belgium recently issued a large United States indicating that CNWs were unnecessary, archaic, and cost too much damn money. Our second argument here is that 5 nations recently indicated that they no longer want us to host these B-61s, particularly because it was politically unpopular in the region, particularly in the context of austerity cuts. It's also ancient technology, so it's seen within the military apparatus of NATO to be largely relevant. The B-points that lens able to stop the ones that TNWs are key to assurance. So we will still maintain defense through things like the security umbrella and other mechanisms. The second is we are able to stop infighting. Our arguments of 5 countries with this backlash, decrease in cohesiveness on NATO, proven by the way in which there's constant disagreements about the role when NATO forces should have in the future. The third argument is the demonstrates use commitment arguments that they will lead to dialogue and diplomatic cooperation on the question of alternatives that's having that in the status quo, particularly since they're not relevant, indicating that we'd be able to create a range structure where the U.S. is actually looking like it's providing an olive branch. These points that NATO's key to hegemony. The first argument is that in the status quo, so hard balancing is the only thing that collapses hegemony. Arguments that NATO would specifically, if it becomes a transatlantic organization, would for other nations like Russia, China, and the Middle East to become more countervailing forces against the United States, would also for there to be the delegitimization of U.S. power in a world with the European is no longer in concert with our ability to have hegemony within the region. And the third argument here is that allow for other countries to have the perception that the credibility is reached just the possibility of there being a deterrence factor to significantly reduce the second argument. U.S. hegemony is good arguments that is able to provide the sea lines for the context of the Navy making for global trade to be more accessible, provides a deterrence mechanism precisely because the power imbalance allows for other countries to know they cannot attack or else they'll be obliterated. We're also able to suffer diseases because of the way in which the U.S. Navy is able to operate across other countries, particularly in the context of natural disasters, providing aid. There's also an alternative. Alternative leads to a power vacuum in which other countries would have to fight against each other, particularly since they are equal polarity. In the case there's more propensity to have first strikes leads to extinction. Are these points that's key to prevent Russia from having an expansionism. Our first argument is that we would be able to solve the aggression and cooperation that happens in the status quo. Russia is currently trying to convince NATO diplomatically to be able to withdraw from the United States, indicating that the United States can stand. Our second argument is that NATO, strong NATO, will be able to turn this expansionism we would solve for unification, allow for there to be collective identity by where they're able to do things like forwardly deploy and more collective matter. It's also critical to be able to resolve the budgetary issues, indicating that NATO would actually look sustainable. According to some policy analysis, austerity could be the death knell of NATO. It's only a question of the United States taking policy to reform that. During this Russian expansion will cause nuclear war. It's particularly true given that NATO and Russia both have first strike policy. It would also lead to proxy conflicts, particularly in places like Georgia and Southwest India, indicating that there would be more regions why political conflict in the future absent there being a strong NATO. Russia would feel perceived and emboldened to attack these points. And NATO uniquely, independently is able to solve for extinction arguments without intervention. And the deterrence factor within the context that Transatlantic was able to maintain peace after World War II for a period of 7 years, leading to a decline of conflict. conflict across the region also stops the trip war escalation because NATO provides assurance to be able to resolve that. The alliance also cements other political issues in aid that is critical to stop for things like poverty, disease, and homelessness. Advantage to the battlefield. The age when the TNWs are seen as just normal warfare and status quo. That makes conflict inevitable. Our argument is that the notion of tactically deployed was used, iterated by the Bush administration to be able to justify TNWs being part of the same part of the arsenal as our automobiles and tanks. Our arguments that this distinction has no relevance given the way in which TNWs actually operate on the battlefield. The beast points that TNW use will break the nuclear fire break, causing a nuclear conflagration. Our first argument is that unconstrained nuclear weapons are more likely in the world TNWs precisely because other countries keep them forwardly deployed, which is not something that happens with SNWs. Our second argument is even a small use can lead to nuclear extinction. Our argument is that the use of TNWs precisely still has the same problems as the winds and radiation. The equivalency of allowing for there to be multiple bombs has to be used because first strike policies indicate that TNWs are not just deployed one, but actually have to be used multiple to be effective. The argument that leaves massive radiation and the collapse of the air ultra due to the inability to adapt to that kind of also kill, the ability for abuse to have sensors, indicating that we will no longer be able to pollinate, which collapses the environment leading to extinction. The argument is that they would use it in the next conflict. Our argument is that this would be the thing that's most likely used in the context of the battlefield strategy precisely because they would try to reduce their casualties, and because it's as a result of the way in which procedure works in a status quo, they would be forced to actually use things that have been sitting down and forever in their basements. Question, Ben?
Yeah, so the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists have been complaining about the threat of TNWs for decades. Why hasn't this happened yet?
I mean, that's an inherency question.
Yeah, their complaints definitely haven't also been echoed by the sentiment of the United States federal government. It means we have a unique position to be able to talk about it within this debate round.
Forward? Also, the use will be able to crush Russian aggression. Our argument is that the use of TNWs will offer the green lighting of Russian technology to be able to create the entrenchment of a standoff and allow sort of arms race to occur, precisely because technologies that are modifying TNWs would be allowed to proliferate and use, particularly in the context of their region. I mean, Russia has an incentive to be able to renege on our negotiations currently that have them reducing their nuclear arsenals. These points plans able to solve the first that we reconceptualize conflict. Our argument allows for there to be a reconsideration within NATO of the tactics that we currently use. The second argument is that the use is only relevant when it's forwardly deployed, indicating that we will be allowed to actually deconstruct the way in which it's a large normative status quo to perceive them as being conventional weapons. The third argument is that TNWs uniquely key. The way in which they are popped up, they allow for there to be a distinguished without any relevance, indicating the United States should take its stance to actually follow up on NATO's calls for us to be able to eliminate them. The fourth argument is that NATO is more key because more likely to be used in proximity to other global conflicts, particularly within the region. Proximity to Russia means that there's more of a capability for there to be Cold War escalation within the region.
It's going to be 3 off, case in order.
You got one,
Case in order, where do you want to start again?
Sorry, I'm actually going to change. It's going to be 2 off, case in order, just starting at the top of advantage 1.
Okay.
And then moving down, and then advantage 2, and then 1 off on the bottom if there's time.
So, 2 off, NATO, battlefield, another?
Yep, if time.
Okay.
Everybody ready? Okay. The first is going to be the Allied Politics. The eighth point is that the American-U.S. security agreement signed status quo around years of Obama's commitment to rebuilding and creating new alliances, repudiated Bush's disorderly foreign policy, and demonstrated a commitment to secure our commitment to our allies. The majority here's this is not just rhetoric. Japan, Turkey, South Korea, Taiwan, Israel, and a number of Gulf states all rely on the U.S. security umbrella. The majority here's nevertheless each of these countries possess the financial resources and motivation to proliferate without the United States agreement. The foreign here, South Korea in particular, is calling on the United States to redeploy its TNWs, or they will proliferate the land. Here's this response to North Korea's third nuclear test on February 12th. It's a new party, South Korea's conservative ruling party, stepped up its call for proliferation if the United States were not to do so. The beast point here is the Gallup poll released Wednesday said 2/3 of the country supported proliferation in face of the North Korea threat if the United States would not redeploy its tactical nuclear weapons. The beast point is linked to the one argument here is the U.S. decreased its security agreement and demonstrates weakness to our allies. The little one argument here in particular, this is true of Turkey and South Korea because Turkey relies on the 90 B-61s, and the most recent strategic concept coming out of Turkey said they rely on those in deterrence in terms of Russia. Probably a reason as to why those countries would freak out. The next argument, those those that are removing TNWs is a signal that the United States is not interested in redeploying TNWs to South Korea, which probably means they have to declare them through those. It sends a broader signal to the U.S. allies that we have abandoned our security agreements because we no longer have the counterforce capabilities. The U.S. strategic position is the counterforce is to have the ability to nuclearly strike every other nation, taking out their nuclear objects. If we decrease our ability to have TNWs, it means we no longer have the ability to have a counterforce if we would deploy so in the face of our allies. The cease point is the impacts. This leads to wildfire proliferation, war, little warning from here to Japan, South Korea, our U.S. allies who will proliferate very rapidly. Our this increases the ability for hair trigger alert and accidents, especially when it is done in a quick way. That are next are those that China must preemptively strike in order to hold their regional dominance is key to resources such as Spratly and Sakaiku Islands, only in a world in which they are the only regional actor with the nuclear weapons able to do so. The next is going to be China modernization. The A sequence is the one in which China's modernization is inevitable. It's just a question of what priorities, though. The next argument, though, is that the People's Congress PL Deputy Jane Peng highlighted the need for war-fighting capabilities and has been pushing for increasing that. The number 2 argument here is the Chinese privatization, nuclear infrastructure, especially their command and control system for submarines. Little A under here is that Zhu, who is a researcher at Chinese Arms Control and Disarmament Association, states that submarines will be the focus because that's the most effective second strike capability that they have. That little B under here is that naval analyst Li Ji stated that shipyards were upgraded for submarine construction capabilities. The number 3 argument here, this is key to a miscalculation accident launch. So warning here that the subs are literally dark in the water. They no longer have a command and control system, which means they don't have the ability to communicate with the mainland. The number 2 argument, those that the U.S. policy for this is to have hunter-killer submarines constantly ping them, which creates a use-it-or-lose-it mentality for the Chinese admirals on the boats. The beast point here is this stops modernization. The warning here is the Chinese modernization is perceived as a threat from the West. The goal is to maintain minimal deterrence, so we literally do nothing more than secure ourselves. Thus, China responds by ending modernization. The number 2 argument here is the last nuclear posture review. Obama noted the U.S. failure to fully comply with the intermediate range missile treaty. China perceived the Obama as fulfilling that obligation, and future cuts will come. The cease point then is the elimination will be need to prior submarine modification. Cease point then is the impacts of the war. And here's this would lead to a nuclear working across pod. The analysis of how this creates a user lose accountability for those admirals on the submarines. Probably a situation which Chinese preemptively strike them. Sure, here's that the U.S. would obviously be drawn in. And number 3 argument is this increases the ability for accidental launch. It is literally having nuclear submarines at the bottom of the ocean that no longer have the ability in order to contact the outside world or communicate. The next is going to be case. Go to the advantage one.
Can you just clarify the link story? How does this withdrawing from NATO mean they stop their projects for modernization?
Our argument is that they're stated as minimal deterrence, which means that if we decrease our strategic, our tactical nuclear weapons, they no longer have the ability, have to have
So
as
they don't
much.
feel like they have
Yeah.
to.
Yep.
Thank you.
They redirect funding to other projects.
On NATO. First argument is that cohesion doesn't matter. There's no reason whatsoever as to why cohesion would be important for military connectedness. The argument here is that the strategic interests are aligned, so it doesn't matter whether or not we are on the brink. You good, Frank? Yeah. Okay. Next argument, though, is that cohesion is residual. You can cross-apply the arguments for Iraq, Afghanistan, and the drones. All prove that we still have cohesion. An example of this was first, the NATO said they would go into Iraq and Afghanistan with us. We said, no, we want to do it unilaterally. And then we came back with our tail between our legs saying that we needed their help. Probably a reason as to why they still did so. The next argument, though, is the commitment is high in status quo. The Obama nuclear posture review restored trust in U.S. nuclear policy. The next argument, the withdrawal TNW means that we increase NATO cohesion. The line here is that Turkey disagreed. The spillover caused another EU policy. And the beast point here is that the former Soviet states are threatened by Russia, and they have to have those weapons there. The next argument, though, is they say the delegation is key to U.S. power arguments. There is no reason as to why we need NATO. In particular, they look at the naval imbalances. You can make the our argument is that the United States Navy is already way more powerful than any other country. We have more aircraft carriers and submarines. Probably a reason as to why we don't need NATO or the access to those waterways. Moreover, the access to those waterways would always be guaranteed to happen. We still have base rights with countries as well as our economic dominance. Probably a reason as to why that would be able to happen. They also say that it's key to the budget. No reason whatsoever as to why that is true. The sequestration probably proved this correct because even though we had sequestration, the stock jumped to record highs, unemployment rose decreased 7.7%, and business and consumer confidence up. All probably reasons why it's happened. Over this first strike policy doesn't make any sense. They should have triggered if their arguments were correct about U.S. NATO cohesion because it seems weak when the United States denied their ability in order to go in there. Moreover, there was no reason whatsoever as to why the TNWs are causing a rift between countries. All arguments actually would probably be increased because they rely on the B-61s. They make argument to have a sanctioned technology that is relevant. I'm going to answer that on the advantage 2. Go there now. Our argument is that the TNW distinction actually does matter because it is key to the Allies' deployment. We've had these weapons since World War II. Unfortunately, our allies haven't been able to keep up with our aerospace technology gap, which means that they have to have old aircrafts and old bombs because that is the only deployment mechanism for them, because the new bombs are way too badass and don't have the ability in order to do so. Probably reasons why they don't have the ability. They say the SNWs are not the same. Our argument is that they would still be deployed on submarines. Probably reasons why their arguments are correct about deployment should have already, that it will continue to happen is inevitable. They say that the NATO used in the last conflict. Our argument is that NATO argument, if it is key to the security agreement they needed and allied proliferation, would be able to turn this. They also say that this would allow Russia to get started off. Russia will not proliferate. The Cold War put them back in their place, and they probably realize they don't have the ability in order to keep up with an arms race with the United States, especially because our economic primacy has only continued and it is too expensive. They have already fetching budget problems. Probably reasons why it's happening. Moreover, they make arguments to how this conflict is inevitable. There is not a reason whatsoever as to why the conflict would be inevitable, especially if the distinction does matter, and we are making arguments about the deployment mechanism. More, they say that DNW is a key distinguished without relevance. I think that I've already answered the relevance question, and it wouldn't matter as long as we have the weapon system. They probably arguments about why the conflict would be inevitable. The next off, since we have time, is going to be politics. The ace of point here is that the offensive cybersecurity is key. Obama administration is pushing the creation of offensive cybersecurity even in the status quo, but it requires Congress support and passage, not guaranteed. Little warning here is that on Monday, March 11th, the head of NASA testified to the Senate Armed Services Committee that the creation of a cyber warfare team is key to national security, and Obama administration will be pushing to expand the currency $191 billion budget to create these teams that I'm sure here's the back by directors of the National Intel. James Clapper saying that cybersecurity tech is the most imminent section threat to national security in the most dangerous sense. The foundation of Al-Qaeda, then here's this, met with skepticism by some of the community members who question the viability of expanding the budget after sequestration. King and Hero and Levin all expressed a wish that the United States remain secure, but said the program expansion is necessary. The next argument, though, is the links. The Spurs GOP backlash. The biggest hang-up with Hagel was the conception that he would cut the military and confirms the worst fears about pacification. The true argument here is that this is playing political with the military. The mid-budget fight conservatives will spin. This is Obama playing politics, which is key to their security. The next argument, though, is going to be the impacts that offensive cybersecurity is key to stopping proliferation. Since Iran has cut off its network and thumb tribes, no way they would be able to fight them. Number 2 argument here is that Iran proliferation causes an Israel preemptive strike, which would devastate the entire globe.
China, Allied prolif, politics, case, NATO, and loves the battlefield. Yeah, good luck singing that for this year's food.
I'm getting to it. Shooting at the walls and heartache, bang, bang, I am the warrior. What, Lauren?
China pro politics.
Correct. Judges. Mckendree. Oh my God.
I forgot about that. Ian got jokes?
China does at its points, the non-geek arguments. The first argument, the Obama administration would have already taken the new type of perceptual link. Specifically, on March 13th, he indicated that the Center for Public Integrity, he indicated the cuts are coming. Specifically, the cuts of the B-16 tactical nuclear weapon means independently. It looks like China modernization would have already occurred. The second argument is cuts to international security advisors in January means independently we're not cooperating with the NATO countries. Coalition is absolutely critical. China would increase its modernization as a result of that type of action. The third argument is the decreasing strategy of new types of warheads within the United States. Decreasing 260 from 2012 means independently. It looks like China already has an incentive to increase deterrence against the United States and other areas. The fourth argument is the entirety of the Bush era would disprove the validity of your link. The protection of nuclear weapons from 23,000 to 13,000 means independently Chinese modernization would be vastly ahead than any of your link arguments would be proximate. The fifth argument is Xi Jinping independently would be able to override any of the arguments. His focus on graphic formats right now is increasing new types of party stability means be able to focus on new types of priorities have already been solidified. Additionally, the new type of focus on new types of star power going on and China means independently that focusing on domestic deterrence. That kind of modernization would always occur against the West. Additionally, next argument's development is absolutely
inevitable. New types of constructions already have contracts, means that they would not be able to shift simply their types of economy. Additionally, because the contracts have occurred, that means some development has occurred because they feel it as a realm against the West, specifically because NATO development arguments is independently, we would be able to contain that conflict because NATO coalition would be able to solve back for the containment of those developments and unpredictability developments. Additionally, no link. You have not made an argument as to why the agenda is concrete in the status quo, i.e. this probably only reassures new types of relations between Obama and China in the future, considering the North Korea issue means independently we'd be able to have more cooperation, understand the way that the United States is committed to denuclearization. We'd be able to understand that they should not have unilateral action. Additionally, the communication is always absolutely inevitable. They would all borrow United States technology. The United States is able to communicate with its submarines to the top layer. You've seen submarine movies, which is probably why China would also be able to do so. No impact scenario. Additionally, the term arguments NATO credibility is absolutely necessary to solve after any type of China miscalculated understanding any type of technological framework specifically for any types of communication is necessary or understanding the way that China's modernization. Additionally, you can see the arguments are why independently we will solve after the United States hegemony via half action, which means independently China's modernization is qualified by a new type of lines of communication, allied prolif. First, what I'd like you to do is extend the 490 government to the China just said independently. This is the reason why it looks like the perception is already occurring in the status quo. Specifically, allies would have already freaked out against the United States because the administration on March 13 indicated that it was cutting its P-16 tacticals. Additionally, cut of international security advisors means they're already increasing their own security advisors. And two pieces of warheads in the Bush era means independently allies would have had an ability to proliferate against the United States. The link is just not valid in this instance because there have been generations of de-escalation within the United States. However, our allies have not taken a stance. Additionally, the next argument is you have to prove a distinction between the plan and the status quo. Our first argument is that a debate is going on between New START as between the United States and Russia as right now means independently allies would have an incentive to increase their proliferation. The second was Obama's plan to be able to decrease to 1,000 nuclear weapons, and after the decrease means independently allies already have an incentive. The third argument is intentions to make clear Obama continues to talk every day about the goal of global zero means he's already increasing new types of allied de-escalation. This would only be coming through on those policies means we probably win a larger magnitude of a turn. The fourth argument is the removal of BMD within Eastern Europe means independently allies already have an incentive to develop a new types of nuclear calculation. Allied pro-lit does not happen in the world, but new types of NATO credibility would be able to solve that back. The fiscal austerity measures are the key pinnacle issue, which you can see on the advantage means that Russian cooperation is trying to be able to understand the way that we are identifying threats in the future. The beast point is double point either. The ace of point is that allied proliferation is absolutely inevitable because they would just try and develop new types of BMD system and they're not assured as of right now, or allies are not based on United States assurance and they never will be, which means that they are absolutely no link to their position. The next argument is the umbrella arguments would still be able to cover any of their nuclear agreements. They are glossing over the entirety of the complexity of the United States nuclear agreements. I say that just getting rid of weapons is the umbrella. The United States still uses ICBMs and has signed contracts with those nations to be able to protect them, which means that they largely would be able to pacify any concerns. Additionally, there is no link internal argument says allied modeling would be able to solve back to this argument. The lack of manufacturing the curse of allied proliferation right now means independently United States pressure would be able to qualify any type of fiscal austerity which solves back or increasing their proliferation. Next argument's turn, we reassure allies the United States is actually committed to its goals, meaning that we provide the impetus to say that a new presidency wouldn't be able to come over and overturn previous new types of indoctrination that Obama is strong in. These policies just solidify, which means that we be able to solve back for the inevitability of proliferation. Additionally, NATO credibility is able to understand the way that proliferation occurs in the interim, which means that our advantage is a precursor to solving back. Additionally, absolutely counterplan the proliferation occurs underground, and you can identify it, which means NATO credibility is tried for understanding new types of technological advancements like Iran politics. Now what I'd like to do is extend the 490 arguments that we got China about why the perception has already occurred about Obama and the March 13 integration, but additionally the arguments as to why the START treaty negotiations, the intentions of global zero, and the BMD reduction from Europe means independently it looks like the political schematic would have already changed within the United States. Additionally, you have not made a word as to why the cybersecurity bill is on the docket as right now. I will tell you what's on the docket. GovTrack. GovTrack is able to check this back. The first argument is a veteran bill to be able to increase their benefits. The second argument is an ability to use derby cars on a White House lawn, and the third argument is a memorial to be able to increase on the White House spectrum, which means that independently you do not have a propensity for these arguments to be on the docket. Additionally, the link turns are comparatively better for the issue. The first argument is turn losers win in an area. It looks like the GOP actually loses out on security concerns, particularly in nuclear weapons. They have an incentive to be able to rally higher for these types of offensive cyber strategy means independently they would be able to coalesce around the plan and provide new types of stopping the coalition around the base. The second argument is turn we actually coalesce the base. The Democrats have an incentive to be able to get on the side with the plan, i.e. Obama's interrogation that he would be able to increase new types of cyber warriors to splinter within the Democrats right now because they think they want to decrease new types of tracing. Coalescing of the base would be able to stall back. That argument means independently they are rallying around Obama's proposal about cybersecurity. Additionally, if winners win, this is actually more empirically true. He would be able to focus on the strategies that he has proposed, like cyber warriors and offensive attacks, which means that we have a better chance of isolating Russia. Additionally, conquering the agenda means that Obama actually comes through on his rhetoric. He'd be able to pacify any GOP backlash, which means that it is probably more incentive that GOP falls in line with it because of an olive branch. You can extend the impacts as to why that goes terminal with Iran. That means that Iran has an incentive to increase new types of proliferation absent a world of a plan independently, which means that not only do you solve new types of cybersecurity, but additionally proliferation is also inevitable absent a new type of NATO credibility. NATO? You say cohesion does not matter, but I am not catching the warrant to this argument. You have not assumed the very nuance of our argument, specifically about the fiscal austerity measures that NATO is facing in the status quo are unique to a new type of global recession that is going on in other areas after Greece, which means that the plan is a prior question to understand the way that cohesion would actually matter. Additionally, you say that new type of rhetoric is highest right now. That's probably a reason that's why independently would trade off with your dissents, but not be able to solve back for the app because the United States maintains the nuclear weapon, which means it's only a question of perception. It is enough to take out your dissents. Though you say Turkey says no, fiscal austerity measures check that back. Turkey has more maintenance than any other country, which means that they've also thought that the risk is too high. They're not able to counterbalance Russia like they think they do because their maintenance concerns are falling drastically underway, which means the plan would be able to solve back in terms of Russia relations. Additionally, Turkey would be able to more incentive to say yes because they think the sphere of influence of the United States is increasing because we actually come through on our treaties. You say that the United States Navy is good and NATO is not key. NATO allows the United States cooperation for refueling, new types of constant deployment, and a trade line of securitization. Means NATO alliances are absolutely critical. Additionally, this means it prevents the United States overstretch, which is the internal link that you can see. That means independently the United States is not have to continue to deploy its carriers when it can rely on multilateral efforts and signing treaties independently solves a new type of conflict and escalation. You can see the treaty arguments. You say, no, first strike, that is not our scenario. Our scenario is only a miscalculated scenario, which it looks like NATO does not have credibility, and they are inverted because of lack of fiscal austerity measures means that is comparatively more probable in a world which you don't have a counter plan. You say T and W's are not critical. You are conceding the empirical about the way that they have to continue to upkeep them. You say B-16, that was announced by Obama, which means that they're looking to an actual plan. Battlefield. You say new bombs are badass, convenient, but irrelevant. Our argument says new bombs would also not be considered normal, which means it does not maintain the epistemological assumption that these battlefield type of technologies are just supposed to be a regular occurrence from the United States. You say they're on the submarines and that they're too expensive. That is our argument, which means independently the United States has a perversion to be able to keep up new types of expensive weapons just because it considers them the same as a tank, which means that only the affirmative provides a new type of reconceptualization. You can see the argument about reconceptualizing conflict and the distinguishing between the United States offensive strategies, which means even if they still have the system, they don't have the weapon or the normal idea of epistemology of war, that war should always occur. This also means that their advantages are probably inevitable because we think that war is natural.
Right. Order. The Allied Prolix. Politics. Advantage 1.
1 second.
Allied
Okay.
Prolix. Then politics. Advantage 1. The battlefield. And then China. 2 seconds.
Politics, battlefield, NATO, China.
You can extend the number 8 argument out of the EMG, which is the double line, that either it's inevitable because of BMD, or there's no reason they would proliferate as a result of the perception. This probably indicates they don't have any game on the linterns because the international community simply isn't responsive on any of these questions. No reason you would ever assess an effectiveness as it. Politics. First, you can extend the LOC number 3 argument that says it's a question of the viability of pew sequestration, probably, and indication there's absolutely no chance that this would ever be able to get back. More importantly, the 3 senators listed out of the LOC, King, Honan, and the last one were all Republicans that were probably that were on this committee indicating they don't think it's going to be particularly viable. Your linterns don't make any sense. First, you losers win, and they would be able to co-wrestle on this issue. You are missing the boat on the eating this argument. The Republicans are opposed to this type of thing right now, both because it would be coupled with the type of cuts they fear would be coming out of Hagel, but also because they think this is a new way forward in the way that the United States constructs the policy. Probably a problem in that sense. Next, you say that this would close the base to be able to stay up. That is not the answer to the argument, primarily because the liberal base is not going to be pushing back on this, and you are probably not ahead on the English argument, indicating there's not a whole lot of viability. Next, you say if it's win, then they would be able to push forward, but we never make a win-win argument. Our argument from Jump Street is simply that it's a question of the political capital that would be afforded here, but more importantly, the creation of a new offensive cyber warfare unit, which would be distinct from the reduction of a deterrent system, is probably a problem for liberals, which is the reason why you don't get access to the winner's win arguments, and all of the arguments probably cross-apply here anyway. There's no reason that proliferation would matter in a world where it's likely to be solved. It's status quo. NATO. Your first argument is that we don't have a war and is particularly responsive in terms of cohesive manners, but it's simply a question of operation. No, NATO.
Okay.
It's simply an operational question. The fact of the matter is that NATO has been able to resolve most of these crises in the past, and your inherent evidence probably cuts the other way. It would likely be an indication that we are resolving these NATO issues in status quo. At the very least, there's a very high risk of status quo solvency in terms of the way that we are involving NATO, particularly because the withdrawal of the B-61 bombs from Europe or in countries that are specifically asking for it, probably an indication that we are creating a larger cooperation with NATO. And you'll consider the number two argument, the cohesion, is residual because the United States can always come back I'm saying probably too much, and indication that there's not ever going to be a reason for the trade-off. The trade-off is irrelevant, particularly when Russia's not going to be able to strike. You cannot isolate a reason why Russia would be pushing forward at any point in the debate, primarily because they are constrained by force of the United States. The same reason that we have minimal deterrence with China is the reason that Russia would be able to resolve any of these issues next. The most important argument I need here is the sixth argument. Your argument is simply this allows cooperation, creates refueling stations, and sea lanes communication. That is not an answer to the way that we've constructed this argument. The primary interest of NATO allies is dependent upon the United States for the promotion of security, i.e. we pay for their security. They get to have sweet domestic policies. That would suggest that they are always going to be wanting the security that is offered by the United States. Means there's zero risk they would be backing away from that because they would be responsible for their defense spending on their own. Most importantly, your overstretch argument is absolutely irrelevant, if only because there is not a reason why that would ever be true in the status quo. As we pivot to Asia, NATO is going to be fine in this context, and refueling is less important because we use nuclear technology that takes years before it ever needed to be done. You have a Russia scenario. It doesn't make any sense. Your other arguments, simply that this would resolve China, are irrelevant because we have specific reasons why the China war is inevitable in the status quo that you aren't responsive to on instead. Love the battlefield. Big problem when you make the answer to the submarines. First of all, the fact of the matter is that you are making the inherency argument. Your inherency argument suggests that if there were true, there would be a decreased conceptualization. But most importantly, you're conceding the argument that the submarines would still have access to these type of things. We use Mark 48 tactical nuclear torpedoes on U.S. submarines deployed in Asia that are not part of the NATO arsenal. It is a lie to assume that the only place that we have TNWs is in Europe, in a world where these would be maintained, and they are on operational hunter-killer submarines. It's probably a pretty good sign that they are inevitably going to be a part of our calculations about what happens on the battlefield, meaning that war would always be inevitable, at least in the way that you conceptualize the plan. What?
Why is the reconceptualization of war necessary on getting rid of all TNWs? When have we ever
Well, first of all,
say that?
if it is not necessary on the elimination of all TNWs, then the status quo probably solves.
Where?
Well, you say the elimination of TNWs in Europe.
We got rid of BMD in Europe. What TNWs?
I mean, we also removed TNWs from places like Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, in multiplicity of countries. I don't have time right now. Okay. This is an indication that our conceptualization of the battlefield will be maintained because we have them operational hunter-killer submarines. This is an all or another question because if there is a residual link that you can't resolve, then there's not a reason you could ever go for this argument in the world of the planet, and it's an indication that nuclear war would likely be a natural component, and there's not a true distinction between conventional weapons and TNWs in this context. It means that there's always a risk of this type of conflict. China model. As an overview, yes, it's true that we reduced our EU TNW stocks, but those areas were not significant to maintain. Turkey is different in this context because of their connection to Russia. More importantly, the plan would be a complete elimination of a unique, symbolic, and significant part of our arsenal. This would be a dramatic reduction that sends a signal that we are not committed in the status quo. The two argument is that the fact that Obama makes the reduction at a time of massive gridlock and instability abroad is a signal that we are no longer committed to that. Creation of a minimal deterrent internationally sends the signal that China can focus on other things. Line by line. First, you say non-unique Turkish perception that there are 13 cuts to the B-16. This is distinct because of the way. This was totally distinct because of the minimal deterrence question. It is a numbers game in turn in China primarily because of the context of nuclear primacy. In fact, you can group the next three arguments that the cut security would have led to co-op and the decrease in start indicates a type. That is again happening in the context of primacy. The differential between the United States and China in terms of its nuclear capacity was not eliminated as a result of new start. There's no indication that they would be eliminated by future start context, which is absolutely critical because the United States has the capacity to eliminate the entire nuclear infrastructure of China right now with less than 5,000 casualties and indication that we are still ahead and they have to resolve the minimal deterrence question. Your next is that Xi Jinping has ordered this to be moving away. There is a problem that the uniqueness assumes all these arguments because of the transition that is happening right now in the building of the new submarine systems that would allow for high-tech communication and command and control systems. You say that focus would be a demonstration that we're concerned with security. That is not an answer to the argument that the United States would be moving away from a nuclear deterrent that signals a more widespread cut that is better than anything that has happened in the world
over the status quo, since this internationally, you can extend the uniqueness arguments. Their primary priority right now is in putting new communication systems in their submarines because of the high risk of conflict and the need to send those submarines internationally to be working as a deterrent. Particularly, you can extend the number 4 argument on uniqueness that they're absolutely critical, and on the link argument, you can extend that they operate in dark waters. This is exactly what we're talking about when we say that it's important they be able to nuclear modernize. You simply assert that they can talk to the mainland all the time. That is not an argument. That is not an answer to the fact of the matter that the Chinese submarines are incredibly old, they rely on outdated technology, and they don't have a particularly convenient command structure. More importantly, you're conceding the argument that the command control has been given to field commanders right now, which means that they are responsible for the SLBM fleet of China in a world where you have also conceded the current policy for the United States for 100 kilo submarines to ping. You created this massive miscalculation scenario, particularly given the TNW arsenals on those 100 killers. It means that Chinese officers would only know that they are being pinged by a badass anti-submarine submarine and would be in a scenario where there's going to be a conflict. This resolves also all the reasons why hegemony would be able to resolve any conflict because of the massive scenario miscal, but nobody knows what's happening. You say that we aren't containing the collection because of NATO and there's no link because we're part of the agenda and that communication is inevitable. Again, this is not a question of relations. You say cooperation with China. It's simply a question of how China perceives the United States. More importantly, if communications are inevitable, and that's an indication of squo, but you have conceded the argument that they would refocus their arguments. You say that you say that they would simply continue to do the submarines because they've already invested that money, but it's command economy and the PLA has very specific priorities. You next say turn the NATO credibility is key. NATO is not in the region, and hegemony wouldn't resolve these because it is a question of nuclear doctrine on the part of the United States that causes the miscalculation. If China doesn't have control, then there's a war.
It's going to be advantage 1, advantage 2, and then China.
Sorry.
So NATO, then the battlefield, then the disarm we're going for. Everybody ready? Okay. Look, on NATO, there are a couple of damaging sessions. Mike makes a lot of really good arguments, but it's still not responsive to the arguments that we are making about how cohesion is residual and that empirically this is proven. They have conceded the arguments about Iraq, Afghanistan, and the drones all prove this to be true. Probably a reason as to why there's no chance of them solving for this. They have also conceded the argument that there is no reason to have cohesion on this because the strategic interests are aligned, which means that cohesion is inevitable. No chance that it ever goes away, no chance that it ever matters. The only other argument that we need here, I think, is this argument about how NATO has been resolved in the past and the United States' ability in order to keep up. I think that we are winning arguments that the United States is fine without NATO's ability and there is no unique impact from this happening. They are making arguments about the budget and a first strike capability, but I think that those are long down the road problems and they haven't highlighted a particular scenario as to where this would happen. I want you to look to the specificity of the DISAD. We articulate particular policies of the United States and the Chinese, how the hunter-killer subs are currently pinging Chinese submarines, which creates a very problematic situation in which they will have to use it or lose it. That argument is conceded. Go to the advantage 2 argument. I think that the argument about conceptualization goes in our way, but they will never change this because we still have TNWs. All of their solvency arguments about how TNWs, getting rid of them, are critical in order to disengage from this conceptualization, but I think that we're winning arguments about how, first of all, they would still have that conceptualization because these weapons still exist, and also the TNWs are not critical. That way that we view the world is always going to continue, especially because of the way in which we use strategic nuclear weapons and the conventional forces. These arguments are not answered, and I think that the probability of the DISAD and the magnitude of it is going to outweigh that. Go to the DISAD now. Look, I think that we are winning arguments that Chinese modernization is coming now because of our ability to hold on to these weapons. Only when we increase and have the ability to stay at our cap and maintain our current policy is China modernizing their submarines. When we somehow go crazy and automatically pass the plan outside of any START negotiation, it decreases the ability that China has in order to have minimal deterrence. That is our argument coming out of the LOC, that it's a numbers game for China, that when we decrease our nuclear weapons out of nowhere, then that means that they no longer have to have the capability in order to respond. So they refocus away from the command and control system. All of their arguments about the developing being inevitable are not assumed by the arguments about how this is going to transition away and their control policy. I think that we are ahead on the question of how China would perceive this action, how they have acted in the past, and those are all reasons why we want it. The other arguments are all about NATO. You can cross-apply the arguments that are made on the NATO advantage because I think that they have to win that before they can get access to any of this as well. Moreover, there's no reason why NATO technology will be key to Chinese submarines, and I think that we're ahead on the question that they're not in the region, and it wouldn't solve for miscalculation. They're going to go for these arguments about conceptualization and Hedge being able to solve this back, but I think that we're ahead on the question that this is a very fast time frame, that even if the conceptualization change did happen, it would take a long